Get started. All right. So thanks everyone for coming out. And again, I apologize for last week. I know many of you were online and a little heartbroken that you didn't get to see my lovely face. Um, but I'm back, and we hopefully everyone got to see the video of my recording from for the class last week at least, and we're able to use that. What I will do is after tomorrow, so on Wednesday, probably Wednesday morning, I will post a homework helper file that I've done that kind of walks through the entire homework. And so that way you'll know kind of what you did and what you didn't do, those kind of pieces. If you didn't do hot on the homework, I will reach out to you and talk to you about, do you want to do another assignment and makeup, now that you've struggled with it and you made it through that, do you want to do another assignment to try to make up for that grade? And I get mixed answers. Some people say yes, some people say no. And I will tell you, not those that say no, I have found if they do an amazing job the rest of the semester, there's not a whole lot of impact from the one grade. So just kind of keep that in mind. But again, you don't know what your how your semester is going to be until you get in the semester. What I will tell you is, from here on out, in my opinion, the class is so much easier. It's going to be kind of SQL by the numbers, and we're going to go through each little piece of this and talk about how to build queries, how to different type of queries, how to do joins, and all these pieces. And we're going to do it in a very structured manner from here on out.
Question.
Sure.
Are you going to go over the software tonight?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So what I'm not going to go over tonight is, if you are wanting to install your own server version of Oracle, that's great. Go for it, and it's a good thing to know. It's there's a lot of value to it. I just don't spend a whole lot of time on the class about it, because most students don't go that route, and it's not there's not a lot of value to them for that. If you want to do that, there are we got plenty of instructions online to go about it. If you struggle with it, what I'll tell you is, I find the number one solution, if you get to a spot and it's not working correctly, is you need to back it all the way out of your machine and start all over again. Unfortunately, with the Oracle install, it is a slightly complicated install behind the scenes. A lot of things are being installed, and all it takes is one little hiccup behind the scenes, and you're doomed from that moment on. So if you really start to see things are not going like the instruction sheets say, more than likely there's something didn't get installed right. And if you're really finding that things are just not working, I would first recommend backing it out all the way and then trying the install again. If you continue to have problems, let me know. I will do my best to help you through that. But again, it's such a complicated install that there are plenty of times where it's a hit or miss on whether I can help or not. Okay, so let's go ahead and share my screen so we can get into this a little bit. And put the participant screen over here so I can see if anyone raises their hand. All right. So hopefully everyone can see my screen. We are talking about chapter 3. So in this, we're going to create and run some SQL commands We are going to talk about creating some tables and identifying the use of data types to define columns and tables, understand and use nulls, and add rows to tables. So let's take a moment and talk about our first week's homework. Um, uh, a lot of people did a great job on the homework and really understood what they were doing. What we were hoping to do with that assignment was to actually let you see that, if you are having to manually query things, not only is it time consuming and somewhat um, boring, right? But oftentimes you can make mistakes. You can easily not catch this or that, and that's what we wanted to show in the homework was, there's a couple of people that nailed it 100%, but for the most part, everyone had at least one thing that they got wrong, and that's just natural. That's normal. We as humans are going to make those mistakes. And so when we have those Excel spreadsheets that we're trying to pour through all the data and make decisions based on it, it's one of the reasons why we have databases now and why we can do these queries. We can get much more accurate data and a lot faster and without the errors that we find we have when we're doing it on our own. So that was the purpose of that first week homework. Now I had a couple of students that went ahead of themselves and they actually installed the database. They basically did this week's work back then so they could do the queries on the actual data. And while that's great and you had perfect answers, you didn't follow the directions and you didn't nail what we were trying to accomplish with the homework. Shoot me an email if you were one of those individuals, and we can talk about doing something to try to make up for that. But the idea was for you all to actually do it by hand. So with that, we are going to this week set up your database and get the supplemental data into the database so we can go ahead and make use of that data through the next couple of weeks. We're also going to view what the data in a table looks like. We're going to talk about errors in a table and how to correct them. We will talk about saving SQL commands to a file as well as describe a table's layout using SQL. So a real quick overview of SQL. It stands for that structured query language. It was definitely something that's been pretty widely popular for a long time. It was developed in 1970, and it was actually, it was not SQL, it was SEQEL, SQL. And so now we see kind of where that structured query language kind of took on the name of the SQL. That happened in the 80s. And it's used by most DBMSs. Now, when I say that, DBMSs, first off, stands for Database Management Systems. Most of them have their own flavor of SQL, as in they will have some of their own keywords and commands in their version of SQL. What I will tell you is if you learn it in something like Microsoft SQL or you learn it in Oracle, probably, and I'm throwing a number out there, right? Obviously, about 90% of all the other engines, right? But each engine does have its own little quirks. In fact, this book will go through and tell you a lot of those little different pieces. It's going to tell you the difference between, okay, in Access, you would do it this way. If you're in SQL, you do it this way. And if you're in Oracle, you do it this way. And the reason they do that is, one, so you can see that there are subtle differences, but they're only subtle. Now, with that being said, obviously Microsoft Access, because it was never designed to be at the level of Microsoft SQL or Oracle, it can sometimes go way off the reservation and really look different. So just kind of keep that in mind. We don't really in the industry put a whole lot of effort into Access. Usually unless you're writing something for it's going to have a very small layer of data, very small company, very small user base, you're going to avoid Access, and you're going to go either straight to something like MySQL or to MS SQL or to Oracle, because even for smaller projects, because a lot of a lot of them also offer free versions. I know Microsoft SQL offers a free, not even very limited, it's not actually a very robust version of SQL that you can use for smaller projects. So with that being said, why not use something that's really well designed and meant for true on database in SQL, right? So, like I said, so as we're going through this, we're going to be focusing on Oracle, but you are also learning a huge deal of how to do things in Microsoft SQL too. So creating and running SQL commands. Oracle Database 11G Express, which is what we use in the book and in our here in our slides. I will tell you, if you are going to use the online SQL Express, you are pretty much limited to whatever version they have us on, right? And that's part of the reason why a lot of people use the online Oracle Apex, is because you don't have to worry about managing the actual engine. As updates come out, they're going to go ahead and just apply those updates, and you'll be the benefactor of those updates automatically. So with that being said, we are on a much later version of Oracle in the cloud than this 11G. So the difference between Oracle, Microsoft Access, and SQL Server are noted in special boxes. We just talked about that. And again, for the most part, especially for the Microsoft SQL, just take a look at it, kind of see what the difference is. So that way, one, again, you can see how very little difference it is. And two, what some of those differences look like. Back in week 1, we talked a little bit about using the Oracle Database Express Edition, which is the online version. And I do really strongly recommend most people to use the online version. You're going to find, I don't remember if it's week 7 or 8, it might even be both. There's a couple things you won't be able to do out in the cloud. You'll just have to type it up, and it'll give you an error if you try to run it. Sometimes it'll give you an access error. Sometimes it'll just give you a generic error. But it's because we, as using their online system, cannot promote ourselves high enough to run those particular queries. And that's because the online version wants to try to save us from ourselves a little bit. So like, you can't get access to the actual system tables. It's okay, not a big deal. It's so little that it really just, again, you will benefit a lot more from using the online version, in my opinion, than running your own version. And for those pieces of homework, all you'll do is type it out. And also, because I know you can't actually run it, I will have some leniency on that. And I'm not going to, beat you up if you got a letter off, or, spacing's not just perfect, that kind of stuff. So the next couple of slides go into using the Express Edition, the online. We're going to actually go ahead and I'm going to step into that and go show you how to sign up and use it. Mainly because, as you can see, the version that they are displaying here is significantly different than the version that is out there now. So the easiest way to get here, do a search for Apex Oracle online, which will take you. It's also, you can just do apex.oracle.com. You're going to come out here to this beautiful page that's a lot of advertisement. They talk about different solutions. You want to go ahead and click the Get Started for free. Free is for me. You want to ignore this first couple of pieces because we don't want the trial version. We don't need the trial version. You can actually go down and get a free apexoracle.com workspace. So you're going to request a free workspace. And then you're going to fill out the form. Now, I'm going to tell you that you should use your SPC college email when you do your email. Yes, you can use other emails. You can. What I will tell you is you getting your workspace will happen almost instantaneously if you use an spcollege.edu address, because it knows it's a college and they know you have a good reason for requesting the free version. And so they will go ahead and just, oftentimes they'll get automatic approval. If you use something like Gmail, they may inquire from you a little bit more information because they want to make sure you're not trying to get around licensing and stuff like that. And again, I usually keep it on personal because you're using this personally for your own edification and education. Take the survey. No, for a university class or training, yes. And you put something similar to, I'm a student at SPC College. I am taking an Oracle class. You should then sit here and take, a good 20 minutes to make sure you read all of the agreement, because we all do that. We're so good at reading agreements. Then we go ahead and confirm and submit the request. Let me try it. I'm trying to do it. Okay, so it must not like my hyphen. Excuse me for the yawnies. Let's try to do this way. Okay. All right.
Come on, it's live at spccollege.edu.
Say again, sorry?
No, it's not at live.spccollege.edu.
I don't think mine.
Okay.
Mine is that.
Or else you already have it and they're not going to give it to you a second time.
They always normally do. I usually get a new workspace per class. I'm just hoping they didn't like the underscore either. Okay, well, what do I want to do here? Maybe. Maybe it doesn't like that I'm doing personal. No, that's the only thing I can think of at this point is we're going to go back and we're going to try to change it to. I have no idea. I've never had problems with this before. All right. It did not like something about my name on that SQL Spring 2001. Maybe it was the numbers. Who knows? But there we go. Now we have a requested workspace. Not that. So now I should be able to go log into my email. And there you go. So we get the email. I'm going to go ahead and say create the workspace.
So what workspace did you request now?
So all I did was I changed the name to just MWeights. So, oh, it's making me change my password. There we go. All right. So now I'm going to continue with the slides, but I'm going to show you in the actual application here what the slide's trying to say to show you the more modern version of it. So when you come into your new Apex Online, you'll see that you have these icons. And for the most part, we're going to go into the SQL workshop, but you can also click it at the top, and you start to see that you're starting to dig into these different pieces of what a SQL workshop is. So, you're going to at some point use the object browser, which allows you to view tables and other things inside of your database. SQL commands are that you want to be able to just type straight commands, which oftentimes is SQL, like select whatever from this table. SQL scripts are like SQL commands, but they tend to be a little bit longer. They usually are encapsulated with a beginning and end. And then you can take a look at utilities. There's some neat things in there, but we won't use utilities all that much, if anything, this semester. And then REST services we won't use at all. Okay. So under SQL commands, and we're not going to get much right now because we don't have any data loaded. And there you go. So how do we get data loaded? Well, under our SQL commands, we can go to the SQL scripts I was telling you about and then go to our class. We can go to course content. And we are in 3. And you'll notice in 3, hold on, I gotta find it. Yeah.
There was a module 3 down at the bottom. Did you see that?
Yeah, what I'm looking for is there should be some files we can download that allow us to create the database.
I think
it
they're
might be
like
in
in the very beginning.
Mhm.
Apologize, whoever I just stepped over.
No, it's-
Like prior, like even before 1.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, right there.
Okay, they moved them out. They like to keep me on my toes, the content creators. There we go. Thank you for that. And so you will want to download those. It's a zip file, so you need to unzip it and then let your slow computer catch up with you. Okay, it should not take this long. And when you expand them, you will see that you have several scripts. In fact, you should have 6 because you're going to have one that will create all the items and one that will drop all the items for each of the databases. And we are doing Colonial, so the one that we're most interested in is going to be this Oracle Colonial piece. So we're going to go ahead and open this. And here are all these scripts that I was just telling you about. And this will create all the tables, as you can see. And we'll talk more about these types of scripts or these commands here in a moment. But this is going to create tables. We're going to insert data into tables. And then at some point, they even in all this SQL, they also actually they do it right here in the create tables. They set up any joins that need to occur. So to run that, we're going to go back to our workspace.
A question.
Yes.
Because you said joins, does that mean that they're linked?
Yeah, there's primary and foreign keys. Yes. I think I closed it.
No, it's the 3rd tab from the right. You just missed it.
Did I really? Oh, yep.
SQL scripts. It's your 3rd tab from the right, yeah.
There we go. All right, so with that being said, we can go ahead and in that SQL scripts area, we can do a quick SQL. And essentially, we're going to copy and paste and then we can go ahead and load this. We can also go back. We can also upload. Now that I've uploaded this as a file, what's nice about that is I can literally just go ahead and hit run. Before I do that, I want to take one moment, come back out here and go to the object browser and show you that under tables, I don't have anything going on. I don't have any views, no indexes. So let's go back to that SQL scripts. Go ahead and run that. So we're going to go ahead and say yes. And then you're going to get a nice, neat little kind of log of what everything it just did. And as you can see, we have 152 records. You can go through this and see all the things that it did. Pretty neat little stuff. But for us, we're going to go back out to now this object browser. And now, as you can see, as I select things, all of a sudden we now have data put in here. So we've got these tables. And if we double in the object browser, if we click on one of these tables, we'll go ahead and we'll get what that table looks like, the properties of that table, also known as schema. I believe if you double click the customer, nope, it does not. You can click the data tab and you can actually see the data that's in the actual table. With that being said, now that we've got data loaded, we can actually go back to the SQL commands and we can actually I think it's customers, right? No, customer. We can actually run queries now. So that is how you load in your scripts to get your database up and running so you can start using your Apex. Now we've talked about object browser. Again, it allows you to browse the objects within your database, which a lot of things are objects. So tables is a type of object. Again, you can come in here, click these and see what the schema is for each of the tables. You can click the data and see the data. If there's any indexes that were built, you can go over here and actually see what the indexes look like. If there's any constraints. So we have a primary key on this one, and it will tell you all those things. That next piece we talked about is the SQL commands, which is, by the way, where you'll do a majority of your assignments is in this window because you're going to be typing queries. And then the scripts was, like I said, where we can load scripts and run them. In fact, I can go ahead and do another upload. Now this is the drop. Now, I don't really want to run this because I don't want to lose all the data that I just I just created with the create script. If I did, I could obviously just run the create script again and have all the information. What you won't have is if you've changed data since then, let's say I update some records in the customer table. Well, since we're using the create script from the very beginning, it's going to give us that clean slate version. So far, so good.
So quick question. When you do the select star, how did it know to use the colonial database?
Well, what's nice about that is right now, that's all we have loaded. We only loaded the one.
Okay.
If you were to have more than one database, you would have to tell Oracle what database do you want to be, are you looking to be in to run the query. We don't have to worry about that per se, because again, we only have one database.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. So let me go back to my slide, make sure I'm covering all of the pieces.
So the question on the top right, it says schema, and then it has some initials in your name. Is that something that was created when you loaded the first script?
Yep. So remember when he kept on saying it didn't like the schema name? It was because it didn't like something about the fact that I was saying SQL Spring 2021. Maybe it didn't like the numbers. Maybe it was too long when they add the WKSP. WKSP stands for workstation. Workspace, excuse me, workspace. And so they take whatever you put and they put the workspace underscore in front of it, and that's your workspace.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So let's go back to the slides for right now, because I've showed you a little bit. Actually, no, before we go to the slides, let's talk a little bit. Let's do some clean up, a little bit of housework about homeworks that are coming, and then we'll actually take a little bit of a break and come back. One of the things I want everyone to understand when they're doing their homework is I want to make sure that I truly understand that you are developing the queries and that you are truly running the queries in your Apex. So when it comes to creating your homework, you're going to create a Word document, and you're going to submit screenshots in your information here in the Word doc. So let's now go back over to SQL commands. I'm going to do a no-no, which is the star, select star from customer. And what I will tell you is most organizations actually block it to where you can't even do a select star. If they haven't blocked it, they will tell you that that's a big no-no. And I know people that have been written up. I believe one person even got fired for using select star. Now, I know you're saying, Professor Waits, but why would they give us that if they can do it? Because truly you can use the select star, right? If you are a DBA and you know your data really well and you know what you're doing, then the select star is, you could utilize a select star under the right conditions. What usually happens is the select star is just a great way to be lazy and not type in the columns you want and so forth and so on. And what happens is you do the select star on this, that's a table that's 300 columns wide and has 3 billion rows. You might bring your SQL Server core engine or your Oracle engine, you may bring it up to 80%, and now you're starting to choke out other people from using your database. So select stars are just not widely popular because they are so encompassing. They can pull back a ton of data. The other thing, a lot of companies won't let you do these kind of commands that are just select whatever from a customer. They insist, I know my company insists, that you always do a top 10 or a top 100. And you have to forgive me, I have to always remember where these things go as well in these queries, because I jump back between 3 different database engines pretty much all day long. So sometimes I'm even here going, remind me of how that goes. Anyways, we'll get to this, the top 10, top 100 here shortly, and I'll show you how to do it properly. But you want to limit pulling back a ton of data. So you're going to say, give me the top how many ever rows. So that way it will only pull that many rows and then stop. It's not going to continue to just chug through data, trying to, pull back a bunch of data for something you probably don't even care about.
Question.
So, yep.
So can you use the asterisk wildcard in combination with like some letters to find specific things?
So again, you can, right? But it's highly not recommended. And I would always tell people, get into a good habit of just not using the star, because if you're in an enterprise situation and if you haven't the muscle memory to not do that and you accidentally do it and you cause a runaway or a CPU spike or anything like that, depending on what your infrastructure is and what your database is doing, the company I work for is a SaaS model product that that on our clients that have a different pricing structure, they are on more of a shared service kind of platform. If one of their queries does a runaway or a CPU spike, it affects the other customers, right? So now all of a sudden, this one customer has caused all these other customers to pretty much come to a halt. Or worse, one of our application support people trying to find a reason why something is buggy accidentally puts in a select star and causes a CPU spike, and now I've got three big clients all at a standstill because their queries aren't coming back because the CPU is tied up trying to solve the query coming out of support, right? So that's why we just try to get out of the habit of doing it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Let's see, I'm trying to think. Oh, so back to the homework piece. So what I was saying is, what my biggest interest is to know that you know how to do this select statement or whatever the command is, and that you have actually ran it in your Apex. So you can do your query, and you can then you can put it in your Word doc, like type it out if you want. You can export all the rows and put it in your document. I will tell you that, for the most part, the thing that I need to see is a screenshot that clearly shows your query in this window and at least some of the data being pulled. And then the second answer is to actually pull the data and put it in the Word document. So for example, on this one, let's say the assignment did say, show me, how to see all the records in the customer table. Well, select star would be the appropriate way to do that. So we're going to go ahead and take a snapshot. There we go. That kind of shows the query. Come back to here, and we can do the download. You can download it as a CSV, but you also can, I think you can copy. Yeah, so there you can see I copied and pasted, and it gives me, but I need all the data, right? So what I just didn't give me all the data. Why not, Professor Waits? I'll tell you why, because right here it says more than 10 rows available, increase row selector to view all rows. So make sure you pick a number that is higher than the return rows and make sure you run your query. Now you can select all that data, copy it out, put it into your Word doc. like I said, I have some students that will export it into CSV first so they can format it better and make it, feel like they like to make it feel. Some people will do just like I did, which is to come out here and just make everything smaller so it fits a little bit better. But that is essentially how to show the homework. Again, you may have to do some adjustment here to make sure you get all the columns on, so forth and so on. Play around with it, make sure you understand how to get all the data displayed like it needs to display. Again, the screenshot's really important because that shows me that you actually had it in Apex and you actually ran it.
Will you accept it if it's in portrait?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, landscape, excuse me.
Yep. And I know that there's a way, it's just not coming to me right off the top of my head, that you can actually make the results a little bit more print friendly. I'll look into it. I'll have to remember it's under the, there's a way to do it. I'll have to look into it, and I'll, if I find it, I'll let everybody know how there's an easier way to make it to where it's.
Can't you change the tab and the indent size as well, Professor? The gear bar and then indentations, and then there's a tab size and indentation size.
Yeah, that only works on this window though, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. There is a way to do it, and it's something similar to that with the gearbox, and you can actually just tell it to kind of output this as more of a text column based kind of thing, and it's easy. Again, if you want to go a different route, do the download and just copy and paste kind of thing. There's not typically a whole lot of problems per assignment. There's anywhere between 10 and 15, so you're only doing 10 or 15 of them. But that's the important thing with the homework, is make sure if I can't see that you physically put this into Apex and ran it, then I won't know that you actually did that and understand what's going on. All right. So why don't we take a 10-minute break, and when we come back, we'll jump into talking about creating a table and go from there. Sound good? So I'll meet everyone back here, actually 5 after 7. Recording going again, and share the screen. There is my participant list. All right, great. So where we left off is we were going to start talking about creating a table. Now, obviously, a lot of these scripts are really important for our commands are important for us to get to know, because it is definitely part of the process of what you need to do when you're creating SQL. This is a good starting place, because that's typically where you need to start, which is how to create tables and so forth and so on. It also is a big helper to understanding what we did with the script, what we loaded, because a lot of these commands are the commands you would find in that script. Creating a table is exactly one of them. So when you want to create a table, obviously you need to have this command, the create table, and the command specifically goes create table and then the name of the table that you want to create. So we saw that in our examples. We can go ahead and see another example. Actually, there we go. So here we have create table and then the name rep. So we are going to be creating a table with the name of rep. When you do that, you're going to follow it with names and data types of columns in the table. So again, back to our example, as you can see, we are now saying we want a column that has rep num and it's a char 2 characters wide. Last name, a char with 15 characters wide. First name, char 15 characters wide, so forth and so on. We'll get here in a moment. We'll talk about what this primary key piece means, and we'll even talk a little bit about what this decimal piece means as well. But the important thing is you have the create table, the name of the table. You start it out with the open parentheses, and you start listing out all the columns with their data type that you want, and you separate them with a comma. The end, you're going to close the parentheses out, and want to get into a real good habit. Oracle, if you're doing some of these more simple commands, will be okay if you don't have the semicolon at the end. Get in the habit though, and I will definitely give you feedback at sometimes. I will take points off your queries if you're not putting the semicolon, because again, I want you to get used to using the semicolon. It's just good practice.
I got a comment.
Sure.
Your PowerPoint is different than the PowerPoint that I downloaded before class, and I noticed that was the same for Chapter 2, that you had a different PowerPoint in your presentation than what was downloaded from the SPC site.
Okay, and that is a possibility. Again, we have content creators that create our classes, and sometimes they make updates, and I do not know that they made updates. Again, the content is the same though, as in the questions and so forth and so on. So this may be a little bit different, but it still will cover all the material. I will make sure to download the latest for the next classes and make sure to use those instead. So that way we're up to speed on all that. Thank you for pointing that out. All right. So with table and column name restrictions, and this is important to know because when you're creating your columns, there are definitely things you cannot use and you cannot do. So you want to make sure you're aware of that. So our names cannot exceed 30 characters. It must start with a letter. It can contain both letters, numbers, and underscores. So here we can have underscores. It cannot contain spaces or hyphens. So again, this is the example we continue to keep looking at. Is a good example. If you need to, make sure you refer back to the examples when creating a table. Now, when it says commands are free format, no rules stating specific words and specific positions, what they're saying is, as you can tell from this example, whoever wrote this, they decided at the end of the comma for each column, they're going to hit the enter key and give a new line break, which makes this really readable, and that's great. But you don't have to. Now, we can go back to our scripts that we loaded into our database, and you can see they did the same thing in our scripts where they really put this line break after each comma, but you don't have to. Especially for scripts, oftentimes when we're creating scripts, we are looking to try to keep, we don't necessarily care as much about the readability per se of the file, because it's a script that was either already, like we'll do it in this format to start out with, so that way it's easy for the next person to read it and do a code review on it. But at some point, oftentimes we'll get rid of all the extra spaces just to shrink the file a little bit, make it easier to copy and paste, especially if we, a lot of times these kind of scripts are pre-prod scripts, as in scripts that we're going to run before we do a production push of our product, or we'll run these scripts sometimes after we've pushed the product to our production environments. So in that case, we're just looking to keep the file small. We want to be able to copy and paste really easy. So we can do this. We can shrink it up, and we can shrink it up by getting rid of a lot of the line breaks and the spaces, and it doesn't matter. Oracle and Microsoft SQL doesn't care about that. just for readability's sakes, we're going to blow it back out. All right. We talked about the command being ended with a semicolon. Again, good practice. Make sure you're doing it. The commands are not case sensitive. Let me talk a little bit about that. What I have found in the industry is that most organizations will have some kind of standard that they want you to follow. That way, all the code is consistent and oftentimes looks good. All these things, right? So, and one of the things I love about is people that are in database, oftentimes everything's in caps. And so they like to put everything in caps. And you can see this is all in caps. And that's pretty normal. You'll see that a lot. What I'm typically, my organization is the commands themselves have to be in all caps. But the column names, we don't do in all caps. We also don't use underscores. We use camel casing. And so that would be how we would do it at my organization. The char and the primary key would be in caps because they are keywords in SQL. And so again, the way you capitalize things, it's loosey-goosey when it comes to SQL, but you can definitely have an organization that has strict protocols. The other thing that my organization does is we actually put the parentheses on their own line, and all these would be tabbed in. But again, each organization can be different.
And Professor, you don't have like a preference of how we do it?
Not really. I mean,
okay.
You definitely will make my life a little easier if you do add some white space like this. This is a lot easier to read. But am I going to take points off? No. I may talk about you to my girlfriend and say how you have messy SQL writing. No, I'm just joking. But no, I don't have a preference.
So if we prefer camel case just because like a Java or Python or whatever, you're fine with that rather than the underscore?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
And what you'll find, especially as I'm doing instruction and I actually do some examples, I try to switch it up as much as possible. So that way, for those that are used to seeing it this way, they can. For those that are, the different ways, it's just easy. And I'll try to also even say, this time I'm going to use the camel case, or this time I'm using all caps, or like on this select statement, we're going to say select guide. No. First and last.
Did we lose audio?
No, I'm just typing. So here is one example of when doing select statements. This is a real nice way of doing it. It makes it easy to read. Again, am I going to be upset if you don't do it this way? No, because again, you can definitely do it to your liking. Some people will go as far as again, what happens though is when you start doing it this way, imagine your queries as they get bigger and bigger. This will start to blow out your homework, right? So you have like 14 lines of SQL query, and then your screenshot, and before you know it, you're taking 2 pages just to do each problem, right? So again, it's up to you, and I'm not going to throw huge fits on how they're done. I've seen all these queries so many times. I know them in my heart, so I can usually see it either way and go any of the ways and go with it. And yes, I even have some students that love to drive me crazy. So they will do it like this, and again, it's just fine. I've seen these queries enough. It doesn't really slow me down. So just remember, like I said, when it comes to working in an organization, that more than likely they will have some kind of coding standard that they will want you to follow, and it can be as simple as, you know, just don't use select stars, to as complicated. I used to work for Jabil, and they had the team I was on had a very detailed code standard, and it went into all kinds of you know, two spaces for tabs. You know, you had to do the parentheses on its own line. You had to use camel case. You had all these. It had a lot of information. So just kind of different for each organization. It's back to 0 here. Hold on a second. There we go. All right. So again, as you can see, this Oracle, the example that they've got, and who knows if I use the more updated slides, maybe they will have more updated images. So I'll have to check that out. But again, while it looks slightly different, let me go ahead and close that so we don't keep getting. It looks pretty close and pretty similar to what version we're using. So again, your screenshots here are still helpful. So as we see here in the example, they put in their code here, which is they create the table rep with all the columns. When they ran it, all they simply got was table created. That's all you're going to get. There's not much else to really indicate to you. Now we know that the run button is not the same, obviously, in other places like access and stuff like that. So again, I'm not going to spend too much time on the slides that talk about access, but I wanted to take a moment to show you that the slides do talk about some of the different databases. Correcting errors in SQL commands. So when you use, you know, it says use the same techniques that you might use in a word processor. You know, make changes and click run and see if it works. To some degree, that is exactly how you want to handle this. And so when it comes to making issues, earlier we tried this, right? And we didn't like it. And it kind of gave us it didn't like the from keyword, not where expected. So what I always recommend is, you know, make small changes and see if that helps you out. If not, start doing queries on this and see if it gives you some clues on what may be going wrong. So that's how you do you look up, you know, what's going on with your errors. Some of these errors are not really robust. A lot of them won't be. What I will tell you about errors is usually, oftentimes I find when it says something like from keyword not found where expected, usually the issue is right before whatever it's saying is problematic. So if it's saying that the from keyword is problematic, then it's more than likely your error is right before the from keyword. And it's kind of saying that not found where expected. Well, that means it was expecting to see something differently than what it's seeing. And since from is where it indicated that it's expecting to see something different, that's a good indication to go right before the from and see what's going wrong. All right. like creating a table, you can drop a table. Dropping in SQL means essentially to erase. So when you drop a table, you are going to remove all the data along with the schema that is the table. This is great, maybe for the examples that we're working on. I will tell you, for the most part, you're never going to drop a table. Not from your somewhat baked application. It just doesn't make sense. And oftentimes there's dependencies on your tables. So to drop a table that has dependencies, now you have to destroy those dependencies. And now those tables, whatever tables were depending on this table, you've got to rework and all these things. So most of the time, we don't typically do dropping the table, especially after we have finally solidified on a schema. So part of doing SQL is that first part, which is the design of our tables. That's why we went through what we went through last week, which was normalizing and stuff, because designing your database is so important to do it correctly out of the gate, right the first time. Because if you're, 6 months down the road, you've got real client data in there, you're running on what needs to be getting done. All of a sudden, oh my gosh, this table is not where we want it to be. We're talking about dropping tables. It becomes a nightmare very quickly, very, very quickly. So I cannot tell you, other than obviously in doing instruction, really last time I used the dropping of a table, other than maybe, let's say I was doing proof of concepts, I might do it there, but anything in against the real product, we have plenty of tables that we've retired. We don't really use anymore, but we have never dropped a table. It just becomes very messy way too quick. Then I'm sure some of you are going, well, then Professor Waits, doesn't your database just get cluttered at some point? And yes, it does. In fact, that's oftentimes why we will do major version changes maybe every other year. We'll do a major version change because we will then rewrite all those pieces and get rid of those tables physically, but we're not doing it. We're usually not dropping tables. We're actually rebuilding the entire structure from the ground up, and just doesn't include that table anymore. But we have to go over the dropping of a table. So you can definitely drop a table. The command is pretty simple to do. And it is essentially drop table. We can see that in our example that we downloaded. So here we are. We had all these creates, create table. Well, here we have drop table, and it is the name of the table we want to drop.
So in the development of your database, would you go through like dropping stuff and then picking up other stuff and then dropping stuff that you feel isn't necessary, or is that not the case?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
If I created database and now I've created something that I don't want, I'm not in the implementation phase, can you go back and drop stuff then and then continue on, or?
Yeah, and again, it depends on how deep you're into your prototyping. I've seen people that are pretty deep, and to delete that one table, it would cause a lot of work, and they consider themselves too far into it. So it really, what I usually recommend is make sure when you are architecting your database to create a good enterprise relational data table, ERD diagram, and work it through. So that way, when you finally start laying it out in the actual database, you can, you have a good design already under your belt to go with.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So when we make these tables, remember we talked about you have to tell the engine, or the Oracle engine, what the data type is for each of the columns. So here are some of the more common column types that we utilize. Char is just that, it's characters, and the N stands for how wide is, or how many characters will that field hold? So char parentheses 20 means that you can put characters in this and that it can be 20 wide. Now varchar is similar to char, except that char is pretty, it only allows kind of the generic set of characters, where varchar allows a little bit more flexibility, especially if you start talking about wanting to do international characters. You want to start looking at more of a varchar. So char is pretty simple. It only allows essentially mainly the ASCII characters, where varchar is a little bit wider. Under the covers, I believe the char, each character is only 1 byte wide, where varchar I believe is 2 byte wide, each one. And again, the N is the same thing as how many characters do you want in your varchar. So 20 characters means if they go to 21 characters, the data will actually drop that last character.
Okay, so the characters are dependent on the ASCII character code.
So char is a much simpler. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. We can do a quick lookup on it. Char first. Look at that. Yeah, that's way down deep, but essentially the difference also for us is that it's going to be because the char is only 1 byte wide, it can only take so many characters. With the 2 byte wide, it can take a lot more characters. Most specifically, when you want to start doing the international characters, you're going to want to make sure you're doing varchar.
Okay.
The reason I've seen most people will just use varchar out of the gate anyways, because why not just start there? People will use char specifically if they are very specific about trying to save size and data size, and they know like this field's only going to be a Y and an N. Well, then they'll oftentimes, well, actually, if it's going to be a Y and an N, more than likely the architect would change that to a 0 and 1. But let's say it can be up to 5 different characters. Then they might use a char 1 to make the data size smaller. Date, pretty specific about that. It holds the date. Decimal, which is the P and the Q, and P stands for precision, and Q stands for quality, I believe. Essentially, this is how many characters wide, and this is how many spaces are reserved for decimals. Then we have int, which is a standard whole number. And small int is int, but the int is 32-bit, where small int, I believe, is 16-bit. So it just won't hold as large of a number as an int does. Again, don't typically see a lot of people use a small int now, just because having data space is not expensive, right? You can get massive hard drives now, and so unless there's a real specific reason you're trying to save space, or maybe you're trying to make your data a little bit easier to faster to query, you might use a small int. But most of the time, people just go with the int. All right. So let's talk a little bit about nulls. Nulls will become really important in your life, and it might even change the way you see things. Because remember, one thing, null is not 0. Null is actually the absence of data. 0 is still data. So we have a special value that represents a situation where the actual value is not known for a column, as in it doesn't exist. So with that, when you're creating your tables, you can actually say, hey, this column does not allow for nulls. As in, when you go to insert data, you must give me something. Or you can allow nulls, in which case I can create a new table and then put data into that table. And let's say the third column allows nulls, I don't have to specify that data. Instead, a null would get assigned to that data. And this talks about not allowing nulls for primary key columns. That's really like a no-no. You never want to use nulls in primary keys or allow for nulls, because the point of a primary key is to always be able to point to a row of data. Well, if you have a situation where you can apply no data to a row as a primary key, then you don't have that pointer like you need. So you shouldn't allow nulls for primary keys. I believe a lot of the DBMSs don't even allow you to do that anyways. So when it comes to using null, we can use the command not null clause in the create table to say that this column will not allow for nulls. What you do need to know is in Oracle and in SQL, the default is to allow null values. So if you leave the column without any indication to whether not null or null, it will default to allowing nulls. And again, as we just talked about, if you specify not null and you try to insert data or edit data and insert a null into a column that has the not null clause, it will throw an error. So here is an example where out here we've actually said not null. It's just that simple. Now this last name and first name will not allow you to put in there with, you can't insert a row or edit a row and try to put no data in these columns. It needs something. All right, now we've created a table. Great. What do we do with that table? We've got the structure there. We've got the grid of pointers in the background sitting there waiting to point to data, but we don't have any data. So we got to start out with the insert. In the insert, we use the insert into, we follow it by the table name. We talk about, and we tell it the values of what we want to insert into the table. We're going to talk about a couple of ways to use the insert. This is just one way, and this is the way you would do it if you are going to present all the columns, all the values for the columns, right? So let's go back to our table we have here, this rep table. The way they're talking about right now, and you can see this example, insert into rep values, they have to give every value for every one of these columns. Now, let me make sure. I think they talk about it down here. Let me just make sure. Nope. I thought they did. All right. There is another way to do it as well, and that is in this insert into rep values, we can actually specify the column names as well. So, for example, let me pull my PowerPoint over on my other screen just so I can see it. And can you guys see my, are you guys seeing my Apex window right now?
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I have the right window up. Okay. So they said insert into rep. And by the way, at this point, I am using both upper and lowercase in a kind of camel case manner. Oh, another thing about the new Apex is the new Apex, online Apex, allows you to use tab in this window. Before, you could not use, the older version, you could not use tab. If you hit tab, it would, like a browser window, it would take you to the next set of whatever, right? You can actually hit tab now and it gives you a tab space. So it's great. So insert into this, values. Give me, okay, I'm gonna have to type this out. So give me 1 second. When you are, by the way, if you can hear the noise in the background, my dogs, which are, they're still puppies, have decided it's a brother and sister that they're gonna play now. And so you may hear a little bit of roughhousing in the background. I apologize. If it gets too bad, I'll get up and ask them to leave the room. So as I'm inserting data, one of the things to notice is anything that's a char or varchar, I actually need to put the data inside single quotes, not double quotes. But however, if it's a number field or an integer field or something like that, or a float type or decimal type, you do not have to put the single quotes around it. So there we have it. So this is going to go into the rep number. This is the last name and the first name. We got the street char, the city, the state, postal code, commission, and then the rate. I'll kind of bring this over just so you can all see that. That's exactly what it was. That's great. With this data, last name and first name, technically the rep number, are the only things that do not the last, so let me try that again. Rep number, last name, and first name are the only fields that have to have data. So what if I didn't want to give data for all the others? Well, you can do that by saying so as you can see here, what I've done here is, because I don't want to give the rest of this data, I do have to indicate what columns I'm filling in. So that's where I can say insert into rep, set these columns with the values of this. All right, let me let my puppies out so that way they can go play. All right, guys. Go and play somewhere else. Sorry about that.
A question.
Sure.
So where you wrote rep and then rep num and last, so is that the shorthand script that we learned in chapter 2?
Where it says rep num, last name, and first name? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, like it's in parentheses.
Well, actually, what it is I'm actually using the name of the columns themselves. So this is saying insert into rep in the column name rep number 15, and the column name last name Campos, and then the name first name is Raphael.
Okay, all right.
All right. So that is another way to do the insert. Again, I like to show that because I know in the book it talks about that as well. But I like to show it because, believe it or not, more times than not, you're going to actually do it this way. Values for character columns in single quotation marks. We talked about that. Great. when you run this, you're going to get one row inserted, not much more you're going to get back. In fact, most of the time when you do an insert, it's always valuable to do a select and do a search for that row just to make sure it did actually get inserted into the table like it should. Now, if we go back to our create script here we have already insert into guide, values, and then all of this data. And the reason why they didn't have to do the set is because they are filling all the columns. They're putting data in pretty much all the columns of every table. So that's why they just went ahead and didn't use the set, because they're filling in all the columns. But that is how it works. So this is kind of one of the common sense slides where they're basically saying is, hey, if you got to add more than one row, when you're done doing the insert, then you can use this all over again. I don't need to retype all this. I can now go ahead and say 21 and weights and Michael, and then run this and then change the data again and keep doing that. In fact, oftentimes we will do that and then copy and paste this into a bigger script if we're going to do a bunch of rows. So how do we insert inserting a row that contains nulls? Use a specified format of insert command to enter null values into a table. Oh, so they did do it for me. And again, I think they're, because it's Oracle, they're not using the set. So you can do it like this. Oops, sorry. So insert into rep, and then you list out the column names. We'll go back to it. Make sure I get it right. So even they are, and again, it comes down to is how do you like to present your data? So here's one way of doing it: insert into rep with the column names. We can pull this back and do this. We could even do that. That all works. I've seen it as fun as this. I'm going to show you one more way of doing this, and let's have fun and see if anyone can figure out why it might be done this way instead. So this is actually a pretty common way that you'll see database programmers and DBAs do their queries. Why put the comma out front? Any thoughts? Anyone want to jump in there and give it a guess?
To ensure that you're inserting the next data after the previous?
That definitely works. But here's the fun thing is, what if I need to add another column? Well, let me do this. Take this. Okay, that's the previous way to do it. Put that in there. So let's say I want to add a column. Well, I have to come up here and I have to go ahead and go to the previous line, add the comma, and add the new column. We're just making something up here, obviously. And then I got to go to the previous line and say my column. right? Not a big deal. It's not the end of the world. What is a little bit crazier is what if you want to take a column out? Well, up here, you go and take that column out. Let's say we're taking the last name out. And then you come down here and, or actually, sorry, let me do this one. Let's say we're taking the first name out. We're going to get an error now because we forgot to take the comma off from the previous line. By doing it this way, the columns themselves are somewhat segregated in a manner that literally the comma goes with the data it's separating. So when I get rid of a column, it's always going to be removed correctly because the comma itself is on the line with separated data, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
it makes each column independent of itself.
Correct. And it makes it to where literally you can go in and just remove a column quickly and easily and not have to worry about was there things above or below that needed to come out of the data to make the query work well. Again, even adding, I know that if I'm adding something, there's got to be a comma somewhere. So I can easily just come down and add that comma right then and there and say, you know, my, and then same that thing down here. So again, it's a preference thing, but you will see a lot. I can tell you, my organization does it this way because it makes removing and adding columns so much easier and quick, and you stand to not have as many errors because you forget to take a comment out. And it happens all the time. It happens so much that that's why people started doing it this way. And imagine if you got a table that's got 30 columns in it, and you want to add and remove columns here and there. It just gets horrendous, and it gets where your eyes are crossed. So it's easier to do it this way. Just a little side note. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is going to be viewing table data. But again, we're coming up on the top of the hour, so let's go ahead and take another 10-minute break. So everyone stretch your legs, and we have a few more slides to go through, but these are a little bit quicker because now we're just going to be viewing and editing data. So let's come back go ahead and meet back at 8 o'clock on the nose. So you got 9 minutes thereabouts, and we'll get started again.
Okay, so we're covering chapter 3 only tonight?
That's right, because this is technically a 7-week. So no, we will cover chapter 4 as well. Chapter 4. Yep, we'll have chapter 4 as well. It's on my list. We'll see you all back here at 8 o'clock. And let's go ahead and share the screen. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about viewing table data. When you want to view table data, you're going to use that select statement. The select command will pull back data from your columns. It's, like I said, we try to avoid using the select star. I will tell you that I believe this chapter's assignment may have you using a select star. Again, don't freak out about that. The select star was more about sharing with you when it comes to the industry, but don't let it. If you create a select star here in the class, it's not going to be. I'm not going to obviously freak out about it. What I will tell you about when it comes to the homework, another important piece of the homework is that again, because I work in the field, one of the things that typically is problematic is where we have a lot of struggle is when it comes to requirement gathering, absorbing, and then creating a finished product that meets those requirements. So with that being said, one of the things that I do kind of stick more to when it comes to the assignments is please only give me what they've asked for. Don't give me extra columns, because then you're not really following the requirements that have been asked of you. So if it says, tell me the last name and the first name of all of the guides that, I don't know, just even if it says, give me all the last name and first name of all the guides in the table. Don't give me their ID and their last name and the first name, because it didn't ask for the ID. Just give me their last name and first name and the data. Follow the requirements of the homework, so that way we get used to doing that. When people say, hey, we only want the first name and last name, well, that's all we want to give them then. So kind of remember that when you're doing your homework. And I always recommend when you're done with your homework, go back and kind of reread the question and just check what you have in your Word document to make sure that it all lines up correctly and it makes sense just looking at it, right? Oftentimes you'll find those last minute mistakes. Again, one of the things that they're trying to drive home ends with a semicolon. So when it comes to correcting errors in a table, you're going to use update command to update data. We can use the delete command, allows you to delete a record. And then as we've already talked about, the insert command allows you to add a record. We're not going to go too much into this. When it comes to saving SQL queries, you can. It's nothing more than a text file. In fact, we've been looking at the scripts that we're running to get our database up and running. It's just a text file. I can open it in any text editor. I've been opening it in Notepad++. I can also open it in brackets, which also reads text files. The only thing about brackets is because it stops in .SQL. Brackets is usually better about maybe formatting it a little bit, maybe adding some color to the keywords, that kind of stuff. So that's one of the reasons why I like using brackets for a lot of things. It's a quick, little, easy editor that is a little bit more intelligent.
Is that a free version?
It is, yes. And Oracle, but it ends in SQL, even though it's a text file. So we just talked about that, and simply this goes more into how to do it in Oracle. But again, it's just a text file. There's not a whole plethora of information to worry about. The reasons why you might want to save a SQL file. I used to work on a small project that was kind of a side thing for me, and I didn't want to go through the trouble of writing an admin interface. So there were some admin queries that I needed on occasion to run. Maybe I needed to go in and change someone registered for an event and they canceled. Rather than taking the time to write a UI to do that, I just had a script that I would change the important pieces of information and run it. That's one reason to save SQL. You can share SQL as well. So that's kind of why you might want to save SQL. So this just tells you to go ahead and create the remaining database tables. That's that running of that script. We've already done that. And this is something unique to Oracle. Describe command. SQL Server, you have to execute something to execute this SP columns to get this piece of information, where with Oracle, you can use the describe and you can see your table. So here's a column. Excuse me. So this is our table customer. If I click describe, Oh, this is something new. So it is not going to do it just on its own. So we're going to have to do it like this and then run it. And describe gives you the schema of that table. So now we can see all of the data. So that's what describe does. Here's a nice screenshot of the select star from rep. And again, this will give you all the data of the rep table. We're not going to talk about that because we are Oracle. Oh, and this is the old version. We've gone back. Sorry about that. We just tried to redo some tabs that we were, or some some slides we were already done. So there we go. This chapter 3, we talked about creating tables and dropping tables. We talked about these different data types, and we don't really care too much that Access doesn't support decimal. We know about null values now and what a null value is and how to make sure our columns that we don't want to have null values. So for example, like we don't ever want a row of data to be in our customers table, or excuse me, our rep table that doesn't have a last name, because then I can't use that data. It's bad data. So I make sure that when someone inserts a record into that, they have to have the last name and first name by making them not null. We use insert command to add rows, and then the select command to view data in a table. Updates will we can use to change data in a column and delete. We will use to delete rows. We can save SQL commands, and then finally describe is how we in Oracle through a command see what the schema of a table looks like. All right. So with that, we are going to go ahead and move on to the chapter 4.
Hey, Professor, I have one quick question on chapter 3 before you move on.
Sure.
For the practical exercise, the second bullet says the preferred method is to complete the SQL select statement, and you give the example, and it says for each of the 5 tables, and then there's like a parentheses that say as shown on page 91 and 92. Do you want us changing our database so that they replicate the tables on 91 and 92, or are we just doing the tables in general so that you can see that we imported it?
So I'm trying to make sure I understand the question. Let me first say, import the data as it is in the SQL scripts. You should not have to modify anything.
Okay.
Did that answer the question?
Well, that's where I'm kind of confused, because the tables on 91 and 92 are not the same tables that are imported. They show different information.
That's possible. I don't have the book right in front of me. More than likely, it's an error in the book.
Okay.
And so, yeah, keep with the, yeah, you should not have to make any modifications to the script.
Okay.
Yep. And I will make a note to look at that. What do you know? What version of book you have?
9th edition.
Yeah, I do as well.
Okay.
9th.
And that was 91 through
92.
Okay.
It shows the 5 tables, but on the tables it shows like the
Actually,
column.
I now that you say that, I think I know what you're talking about, and yeah, it's an error in the book, and because they'll do that sometimes. Like they'll list the column name out as like guide number, and sometimes it'll be guide ID, things like that. So yeah, I'm pretty sure what you're looking at is an error in the book.
Well, so the tables, like the information in them are correct, but they're more like a schema, right? So it says like the column, and then down the column is like all the actual columns, and then the types are the chars, and then date and length and so on and so forth. Whereas like our tables, the each of those individual columns down the column are like, you know, the rows.
So this is Alicia, and the charts as described, the sample charts for Colonial that are listed beginning on page 9. Yeah, page 9, because I keep referring back to these pages. Those all have the correct column names and table headers. So just to let you know, that's what I'm referring to, and those are all working.
Okay, great. Yeah, I believe 91 and 92 just have errors in it. I'm looking at it now. And actually, I'm now looking at the 10th edition. So let me find the 9th edition, and I'll take a look at it more closely as well. And I know I have the 9th edition around here somewhere.
Okay, yeah, I'll email you on a side note too, Professor.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, here's the 9th edition. I like going back and looking at the previous editions because, like, I have all my stickies in it, and yeah.
Yeah, whoever invented those stickies knew what they were doing.
Yeah, yes, they do. I actually have a rule at the office that stickies are nowhere allowed near my desk because it will become just chaos. But I still use the little ones to mark pages in books to make sure when I'm giving instruction, like, this is an important page. So, all right, let's go ahead and jump into 4. I know we are kind of getting up against the clock here. The good news is a lot of 4 it starts out with some of the things that we've already been talking about, just expands on it a little bit. So we're going to talk about simple and compound conditions. We're going to talk about things like where clauses, so forth and so on. We're going to talk about between, like, and and, which is those conditions we can use within a where clause. We're going to talk about how we can sort data. And we're going to definitely talk about multiple keys within data because that is something you'll need to know for your assignment. We're going to talk a little bit about aggregating data in a query with subquery, and also with subqueries. And we're going to talk about grouping data together. With the grouping, there are, you can group data by using the group by, and then there is a special reason to have the having clause. So we're going to talk about that a little bit as well. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about retrieving columns with null values. All right, if everyone will do me a favor and kind of buckle in, because we are definitely going to go through these first couple slides a little faster, just for the fact that some of this is kind of just repeat of what we just talked about. We know what a query is. We've already talked about how to implement the select in SQL, that there are no special formatting rules. And then when it comes to select statements, we have this pattern. It is select from where. What's interesting about that is you're going to start to notice when I type queries, and a lot of people type queries, they like to do that. They like to say select from where, and then they will indent and say customer, select, sorry. Yeah, customer, is it num, last name, first name from the customer table where, let's say customer, don't even know if that there is such a record. Nope. So here's another thing, by the way, I wanted to show you is, so this where clause is essentially a filter. If we want to, we can highlight some of our query, and when it's highlighted and we hit run, it only runs the highlighted portion. So by highlighting this first part, I'm actually taking that filter that I just created off. So we'll hit run, and now you can see that I got all the data. So now I can actually go, oh, it's because there is no record but just one. So now I've unhighlighted it. So now it's going to run the entire query. I hit run, and there is our one row data with only last name and first name. But you can see the select from where. And what's nice is you can even now start to, if your code gets really bloated, especially like if you like doing it this way, you can now collapse data as well over here. Now it does say where the where clause is optional, and that's just because while the where clause is essentially optional, it's not. The only difference is if you don't put the where clause, SQL essentially says where everything. And so behind the scenes, it's putting the where clause in for you. It's just saying essentially where everything. And so we don't have to type out the where clause, but you know, if you don't put the where clause, you are still saying something. You're still saying, give me all the records. When it comes to retrieving certain columns and rows, in that select statement, we can list out the number, name, and balance of all customers. So we can specify specific column names. We can also use the where clause, no where clause needed, sorry, because all customers are requested. So again, this is what we just talked about. If you don't specify a where clause, all is being specified. There's that asterisk again that indicates all columns, and that's what that asterisk means, by the way. Select star just means give me all the columns, not all the rows. That's where the where statement comes in. The star is all the columns. It will list all the columns in the order used when the table was created. Interestingly enough, please understand that if you do a select statement, if you don't order by something, and we'll talk about order by here shortly, both Oracle and SQL both say that they do not have a guarantee of what the data will come back as. It might come back in the order that was inserted. It may not. There's no guarantee. More than likely, it'll come back in the order it was inserted, but there's no guarantee. With the select star, the columns will come back to you in the order that they were created. When we use a where clause, it's to, as this slide's saying, satisfy some condition. It's essentially we're putting a filter on our data. When it comes to a simple condition, it's going to be a column name with a comparison operator followed by either a column name or value. We've been doing so far pretty simple. In fact, what we just did was a simple condition. It is a customer number equals 101. Nothing complicated with that at all. So they call those simple queries. Simple conditions, excuse me. Well, of course, if we have simple conditions, then we must have compound conditions. And that's when we start putting more filters together with and, or, and not. So when we talk about and, we're saying that all the conditions must equal true for that row to come back. Or operator says any simple condition is true. And the not operator reverses the truth of the original condition. So take a moment to think about that. Let's run this again. As you can see, I highlighted just the select and the from so I can get all the records. By doing this, I've removed the where clause, which says give me back everything. And we're going to change this to say, I'm looking for a first name, see if there's, I believe that there is a first name in here that is repeated. No, because that would have been way too simple. Okay, well, we're still going to move on with that. Still as a. So what we're going to say is. Let's run this, and we get that one row back. A couple things here I want to show you is we have a simple condition looking for Adam. We can all of a sudden make it complicated or compound and say that it needs to have a last name equal to and when we run this, we'll still get that one row back. Now, what if I were to change this and say that it has to, let me go here, go to this, ocean. What if I say it has to have ocean? We're not going to get anything back because Adam's last name is not ocean, and they both need to be true for a record to come back. So look at this when we talk about this, and here's kind of how Oracle's doing it. It's going, okay, first name, is it Adam? No, ignore this row because it's an and. The fact that this first condition is already false, there's no way we can show this record. So keep going until the first name is Adam. And here, it finally gets down here and says Adam. Okay, so far so good, that's true. Is the last name Ocean? And that comes back as false, and so it says, well, these both weren't true, so this record does not exist. It does not, or this record does not meet the criteria to be shown. When we change it to, so again, let me run that, and we'll see no records come back.
That's like programming logic, right?
It is. It is definitely programming logic. And what go ahead.
Are we able to use operator symbols instead of words like a exclamation mark or an ampersand?
No, because SQL is built off of an English English engine.
Okay.
It doesn't understand. And I say that, and I always want to go, let me just make sure. Yeah, so
I haven't updated it yet.
Yeah, so it does not recognize. It wants English standard. Yeah. So what we can do though is we can say or. Now what's going to happen when I do or? I should get two records back because as long as one of these is true, it will return that record. So as it goes and says, hey, when it gets to this record, it says, is Adam true? Yes. It doesn't even need to look at the next condition because Adam is all it needs to have is true. It only needs one of these to be true. So the fact that Adam is true, already it can return that record. When it gets to the Arnold row, though, it goes, Arnold, no, not true. Is Ocean true? Yes. Oh, I can show this row. Now, believe it or not, just for your edification, this and statement actually will run faster than this or statement because with the or statement, every column every condition has to be checked no matter what. Because again, any of these can be true and you would pass muster. However, on an and, if that first column does not hit true, it doesn't have to look any further. It can discount that row, and it doesn't have to do any more searching on that row. Okay. There we go. That's why we get the two rows back. A little something also to just kind of keep in mind. I think over the last, 5 years, we've gotten better at this, but as we speak English, oftentimes when we are speaking a narrative, we reverse ands and ors. Okay, so remember that. Like, I might say, I just lost a good example of how we do it. I live in St. Petersburg and I live in Apollo Beach. or excuse me, I live in Florida and I live in Apollo Beach. Well, that would work because the the city and the state are two different columns. I just lost my good example. I'll have to think about it and I'll come back and remind you all. But just kind of keep in mind when you're thinking it out loud, when you're talking about it, when we actually speak, oftentimes we switch and when we actually mean or. And it will come back to me what the good example is of that, and I'll have it for you. But just kind of keep that in mind. A little scatterbrain today. So what about the between operator? The between operator allows us to do a select using a where we can specify data between values. The important piece to know about this is it's inclusive. So if you are doing it this way, 2,000 and 5,000, the values will be included in the data that's returned. Not 2001 through 4,999. It's 2,000 and 5,000 will be included. So simply, that is yeah. Using computed columns. Computed columns does not exist in the database, but is computed using data in existing columns. Now, we've talked a little bit about this in the first week, and I said, there are some fields in our data that may not necessarily have been a part of a true piece of information, a true data model, because it's data that has been aggregated from two other columns. And so normally we wouldn't store that data because you're just taking up space when we can always figure out that information on the fly. So for example, we have this num persons and this trip price. Luckily in this column, we don't have like total cost, because that would be the number of persons times the trip price, right? And so why have that column when we can always figure it out from the data we already have? Why make more data when we don't need to? There are reasons, by the way. Let's say that this table was a huge table, massive table, and you wanted to be able to search on it and do reports on it rather quickly, and you wanted to find all the rows that total cost came out between two values. Well, if you're talking 3 billion rows of data, to do the math on all 3 billion rows just to figure out that query may take a lot longer than you want it to. So in that case, maybe you do go ahead and add data to your table that is already the aggregated data, because you don't want to have to do the math on every row when you're doing a query. So there's one good reason why sometimes you will include aggregated data. But for the most part, we try to avoid that. One of the reasons why we try to avoid it is also you're asking for trouble, because what happens if someone updates the two pieces, or one of the two pieces of what makes up that third piece of data? Like, what if I went back into that table and I updated the trip price on this row, but I didn't update the total price or the total cost? Then number of persons times the tip price would not equal the total cost, and now we have data that's bad because we don't know which is true out of the data. So you run more risk when you do that. All right. That's chapter 3. Sorry. When it comes to operators, we can use the plus, the minus, the star, and the divide for division. Pretty straightforward. So in our example, we were saying trip price and other fees. So if I go back to trip price and other persons. That was not the table we were looking at. So 1 second, please. Reservation, sorry. So as you can see, it shows us this row because it did the math for us. It said number of persons times trip price, and that aggregated data equals 110. One last thing I really want to say, or not last thing, one thing I want to talk to you about real quick also is, so earlier we were looking at the customer table. And we said where first name equals and that row comes back. However, when you use the equal sign, it is case sensitive. As you can see, no rows just came back because we used a lowercase l. Now, the best part about this, by the way, is I will get homeworks back that when they do the query and then they put it in their homework, they will do it like this, and then they'll list out the row of data as if they got it. And that's why I need to see a screenshot of you running the query, because I know for a fact that if this is the query you actually ran, you didn't get a row of data back. So that's why I always ask for the thing, because it is important to know that when you're using the equal sign, whoop, it is case sensitive.
And that's because it's a string you're quoting?
Correct. And equal is, for Oracle, equal is, it must be equal byte-wise. So that's why it's uppercase versus lowercase. All right. I do believe I have about 3 minutes of this class left. Is that correct? Or do I have 13 minutes?
We go to 8:50, I believe.
Okay, great. Another type of where clause is the like. The like allows us to do searches on character fields and varchars where we can use wildcards. And there are two types of wildcards. There's the percent sign, which is pattern matching, and is any and all characters represented by the percent sign. And then there's the underscore, which is just one character. So in this example, they're saying like, and by the way, it should have the single quotes out front and out back. So right? And it will use the anything that when it sees the percent sign, it says anything that matches anything up front plus this Columbus will work. And then the fact that we have it on the back too means basically as long as the word Columbus exists somewhere in the text, it will retrieve that data. So
Would
that's why. Go ahead.
Would that be case sensitive as well? So if there was like a lowercase c Columbus, would it come up?
I think it is, but let's go test it. So we know that this should work. Yeah, so it is also case sensitive. Good question. By the way, that's another thing to understand about, when you learn languages, it's impossible to retain everything. So oftentimes you will go and just do a test query just to see if it's right, or you might have to do a Google search just to refresh you on that. And that's a good example of that is I couldn't remember if that was case sensitive or not. And then the underscore represents that single character. So again, this would stand for Tim, Tom, or the T3M. But it would not stand for TOOM because it's only one character. Next up is to talk about sorting. So this is what I was telling you about, that by default, no defined order is guaranteed in your results display unless you use the order by clause. And then when we use the order by, we're going to tell it what's the key that we want to order by, and we can say whether we want to ascend or descend. We don't specify ascend is the default sorting order. So you probably watched me before. Now you can do a where clause. And by the way, when you put two dashes out front, it turns that line into a comment. And so the Oracle engine will ignore it. So I could put a where clause here and then still do the order by. Or I don't have to have a where clause, and order by will still work as well. So in this case, we're going to say order by, and we're going to say last name. And that is, as you can see, in ascending order. We can also go ahead and say ASC to specify that we want ascending, or DESC for descending. We also have the ability to sort by more than one key. The first key that you sort on is known as the major sort, and then the next key is known as the minor sort. So for example, if in our customer table, if we had, let's say, a last name that was repeated, we could say sort on the last name, but then sort on the first name after that. So the two last names that are the same would show up together, but then be supported on the minor key. If there's no duplication of the last name, they would just ignore the minor sort because it doesn't need, it would sort on the first name first. Excuse me, sort on the last name first, and only when there is same data in that major key with the minor key then being used. Does that make sense? All right. And then, so your first key is always the major key, and then everything after that is a minor key. That's why you want to list the sort. You want your list sort keys in order of importance. Just like we did with arithmetic, we also have some functions that we can utilize as well. And Average calculates the average value in a column. Count determines the number of rows in a table. Max determines the maximum column and a value in a column, while the min is the min value, and then sum calculates the total values, calculates the total of the values in a column. Now, what I don't like about these new slides is this is a good spot to have a screenshot. And even though it's an older screenshot, it definitely is worthwhile because yeah, so unfortunately, you'll have to take a look in your book from the screenshots just to see, because you can use these functions in different places, but at minimum, understand what these functions are when it comes to using them. Again, average, count, max, min, and sum. With the count, we can use it to count the number of rows in a table. You can use the asterisk to represent any of the columns, but when you use the count, it's going to return, instead of the actual data, it's just going to tell you how many rows fit the criteria if you're in your where clause. If you do it without a where clause, it's going to return the number of rows in your table. With sum, we can calculate the totals of columns. So let's say you have 2 columns, you want to do the aggregation like we did before. We can use sum in the select part rather than the where to make a new column that would actually have the calculated totals. Same thing with using average, max, and min. You can only do them on numeric columns, so you can't, well, it ignores nulls. And here's an example where we're selecting the sum balance. So this is in the select part, so it's going to return a column that has the sum of the balance, the max of the balance column, and then the min balance from customer. I don't think I can run that or not. Yeah, no, it's working off of a different data set. My apologies. The distinct operator is allows you to eliminate duplicate values. So if you do a select and you said on the customer table, select last name from customer, let's say that there were several rows that had the same last name, Thomas. It would only show you one Thomas. It only return one Thomas. It would ignore the records after the first Thomas as duplicates. Here's an example where we have some repeat data here, eight rows return. When we use distinct, which is right here, we only got 6 rows back because it removed the duplicates. I know I'm going pretty fast at this point because I am trying to get this done in 4 minutes here. I will post this video so you can go through it again. I will also find some of my previous lectures about this chapter and put them up so that way you can go through them a little bit. And they go a little slower on this chapter so you can really get an understanding of what we're talking about. When it comes to nesting queries, we can have a query that makes use of another query's data. That inner query is known as a subquery. So the example here is we're going to select from the order line table the order number column where the item number N, select item number from item where category is PZL. So what happens is this query actually gets, the inner query gets ran first and returns data that kind of goes into these parentheses. So it's going to return all the records where the category is PZL. And it's going to return the item number for the PZLs. Once it takes and makes that list of item numbers, it now is going to, because remember, N is a type of selector we can use to do a query on a list. and it's going to select the order number for all the items that get returned from this query. We can group data. And when we group data, we're grouping rows that share common characteristics. So oftentimes calculations in the select command are performed for the entire group when we use group by data. We group data on a particular column and we oftentimes calculate statistics. So here's an example of using the group by. We're selecting the rep number, but we want to do the average balance. And to do the average balance, we need to group the data. Otherwise, we have rows of data that are separate, so there's no average. But if we group things by the rep number, then we can now do the average of those gathered group, that set of groups by records to give that average. We then have this one last command, and that is the having. Having is similar to the where, but it is meant to kind of do a where clause on the group itself. So for example, or excuse me, explain that, where limits rows. Each row, it limits row by row. Where having groups the data together and then selects on the groups themselves. So it's like doing the where on a group rather than on each row. So our example here is pull this data together and group it by the rep number, do the average of those rows, and then only show the ones where the average is greater than 1,500. All right, we are out of time, but I only have really one more slide to go, so we're just gonna hold in for a second and let me go through it. When it comes to nulls, it's conditions that involve a column that can be null. So we can say, hey, give me all the rows in this data set where, for whatever reason, the street doesn't have any data. Remember, null is not zero. It's really no data. So select the customer number and the customer name from the customer table where we don't have data in the street column. So we say where street is null. I know that was really fast. Like I said, I will post some additional videos for you to go through and understand. We simply talked about how we can have better select commands by using comparison operators, compound conditions. We talked about the between operator and the like operator. We then talked about, we didn't go too much into detail on the in operator, but in, when we use the in operator, it's a list of items separated by comma that it will search on all those items in that list. Order by allows us to order the data. Then we can aggregate functions, use aggregate functions to put data together, including distinct, which means it will get rid of duplicates. A subquery is a query within a query. We have the group by, and then to filter on the groups themselves, we have the keyword having. All right, so that is the end of the lecture. I know it's the end of class. I'm sure plenty of you have something you need to get done and need to head out. That's fine. Let me go ahead and stop my share. What I will do is I will stay online here for anyone that wants to stay online and ask me questions if there are questions and answer those. But if you do have to run, I understand. And again, I will post this video as soon as it's done rendering.
I just had a quick question about the chapter 3 homework that we were talking earlier, just to make sure I understand right. So we're querying like select star from trip, and then you want us to copy the table that we get from that, right?
Correct. So I want a screenshot. Okay. I need a screenshot of the query in your Apex, and then also the data that you return.
Okay, cool. Yep. Just double checking because
no problem.
What we were talking about earlier. All right.
Hey, Professor, when it comes to the screenshot, do you care like if like either a line of it or like the headers are cut off or not?
You know, I don't really. Let me see if I have my screenshot that I took.
Because I was gonna say I even like collapsed all the way down to my one line of like the select, and it cuts like one line off no matter what.
Yeah, and again, I just need to be able to look at the screenshot and really, I can see that you actually ran the query in Apex, that you didn't just go out and find it somewhere, or you just guessed at it and you didn't even try it, right? So I just need to be able to see that you actually physically ran it. So yes, in this case, you know, if you did the here my pen, if your query was, you know, this far, then I can still see the query and I can see a decent amount of data captured. And so I know you ran it. Plus, with your data table now under that of the actual data return, I can definitely put it all together and say, okay, this was actually ran in Apex, and here's the data that came out of it.
Okay, yeah, I just didn't know if you wanted like two different ones to show all the data, or if just one was fine cutting off a line.
Yeah, no, just yeah.
Okay,
the screenshot
cool.
like that. Yep.
I actually had one more question about last week's chapter 2.
Okay.
I emailed you, but it was kind of complicated and hard to explain in email. So
Okay.
all right, go. So all right, it's in regards to the customer table, the example of when they're putting it from second normal form to third normal form.
Sure.
All right, so I was just wondering why, since second normal form, why like the rep number column wouldn't be considered a primary key when you're going from like first normal form to second normal form. Why would that make it in the same table? Do you understand what I'm saying?
So let me try to understand. So first again, what's the table we're talking about?
Customer. If you're looking at the book, it's on page 47.
And are you in 9th edition?
Yes.
Okay.
Like looking at the table, me logically, I would think going from first normal to second normal, I would take a rep number as a primary key and make it its own table, going to second normal form and not third normal form.
So going to third normal form, you're right. The rep number, that last name and first name, which is behind the last 3 columns, would be ripped out and made into its own table.
Why wouldn't you do that from first to second normal?
So you could, but you would see, the problem is you're thinking logically, because you would automatically put it in third form in your head, right?
Okay.
What I'm saying is but because we're trying to kind of go backwards so you understand what second form is, you're going against your nature to do it. And so
okay,
if you did that, when you went to second normal form, you went ahead and ripped that out, you would actually just be skipping second form. You'd go straight to third form. So the only reason why you did it is just to show you know how to do second form.
Okay, so it's what you were saying last time we talked, when you're like, that's the hard part, is learning. We're too trained with this already. It's too intrinsic for us.
Yes, and I would tell you, I've talked SQL with people for a really long time, and there was a long time, so probably maybe 5 years ago, maybe a little more, where it was people had a hard time going down to third level. Like they didn't understand why you wouldn't have the rep number and their names right there in that same table, because it's logical. That pertains to this piece of data too.
Yeah.
And what I would say is, well, the difference is second form, you have removed the multiple groupings of data, but remember, second form still has to have repeating data. That's why that rep number is
okay. So
to go from 2n to 3n, you then remove the repeating data. So
any rows that have repeating data, which is what I was looking for when determining third normal too.
And that's very like I said, not everyone, but a lot of people are just like, well, why wouldn't I just go ahead and do that? Go, well, normally you would.
Yeah.
But we need to see that you know how to break it, I guess.
I get it. Yeah, and I tried to email you, but it's kind of complicated to go over with email. So
I think I did respond to you though, and
you did, and you were like, I'm not sure I understand, and I'm like, I'll see it.
And I'm glad you did, because I definitely now understand a lot better.
Yeah, And then I asked another question, which to me it was about the with the problem, the first problem. The book just kind of sucks at wording questions.
They are, yeah.
Because I was asking, because it said to use the figures 1-4 through 1-8 for the first problem.
Mm-hmm.
And what I wasn't sure of is if we use those exact tables and show them in first and second form, or use the data from those 4 tables and make our own unique table.
That's what my question was too. Exactly what you.
But to me, I mean, the tables themselves are in first normal form. So it's
Right.
kind of like, they're already in first normal, and half of them are in second normal as well.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand. So what problem are we talking about?
Colonial Adventure Problem 1,
Can you give me the page number?
57.
Using the type of table that is but not. So yeah, essentially, you're going to take that data, which is somewhat normalized already for you.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to unwind it, and you're going to make up a table that's going to combine a couple of those tables together.
I kind of took some attributes and some entities and put together a table with it.
Yeah,
I think I combined like guide number and customer number and trip number and like some attributes from that.
Yeah, and that's exactly what you're gonna do. Is you're gonna take one table, and you're gonna find another table that has what would be, okay, if I put this data to this table, it's gonna all of a sudden I'm gonna have like these half lines of data that pertain to this one line of data, and you're gonna get that where you have all of a sudden you get these expanding rows that aren't really rows.
Yeah. I think I got it. Just the way the book worded it, I wasn't sure if we're supposed to use an exact table or.
Yeah. And again, part of the wording is, again, it's trying to tell you to do something that you're just, your brain is so against.
Yeah.
And so it is confusing on that.
Okay. All right. Well,
a question too.
Sure.
For the same page, and it's for question number 3, where it asks about the diagrams. So I answered all of the questions. Were you wanting us to do like that relational diagram with the square, the rectangles, and then the lines?
So on page 57, correct?
Right.
Number 3.
It says do the shorthand representation and a diagram.
Hey, give me 1 second. Let me just take a look at it'll be a lot faster for me to just look at my personal key.
Yeah, I have no clue if I did that right, because it has attributes and the book doesn't say how to do attributes in the diagram at all. It only has entity relationships.
Right.
Which I Googled it because like I need an answer somehow.
Well, I mean, and that's why I didn't turn mine in yesterday. I just like I spent hours on this.
Please do me a favor. Just notate that you and I talked about this, and so that way I'm not beating you up on the late charge.
Oh, okay. And I'm at a BC, I sent you that message. Grace is my middle name.
Okay, great. Now we're in 3rd week, just so everyone knows. So at this point, I don't take attendance anymore.
Okay.
At about the 60% mark, thereabouts, I'll get a message and they essentially say, hey, let us know who's not really participating in class, right? So I go to the grade book and I look through it, and if you have a lot of zeros, like you're just not turning things in, then usually what I do is I'll actually email you first and go, hey, what's going on? But then I'm supposed to mark it because of financial aid. I'm supposed to mark, the first 2 weeks and then that last 60%, whether there's participation or not. I think if you don't have participation at the 60%, they pretty much unenroll. They remove you from the class. All right, so hold on, let me go.
Yeah, I could have had this done already, but I started the question 1 over like 4 times because I totally did not get it.
Yeah, and I apologize. I know I'm a little bit behind on my emails and actually my grading. I'm used to getting 3 classes, teaching 3 classes at a time, but for some reason, the 3 classes I have this semester, I'm getting bombarded with questions, which is good. It's normal, but I'm finding it difficult to answer all the questions and get all the things. So just bear with me, and I'm pretty easy to work with. So if something doesn't get answered and you turn in something late, just notate that, and I'll take care of it. I'm not a
Okay, thank you.
yeah. Let's see.
Yeah, actually, doing the first one, I have like 3 pages of notes.
Exactly.
Like where I started it, and I'm like, no, this is dumb. This is
I'm like, is this a quick question? Because this is like already done.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, I can tell you, number 3, you're gonna feel like that, right? You're gonna feel like I feel like I've already done this, and I know it's weird. That's why I also say that the second week is always the hardest week, because it's just, but it's a necessity. There is a value to it, to understand about, because if you understand how to make data not normalized, then you actually are better at normalizing data. So
right. I wish it would have just worded it differently and say this unnormalized instead of
worded it better. It'd be easy.
So I reread that part because I'm like, I must have missed something.
Right. But the reason why they also didn't use the word unnormalized is because it is 2NF is still normalized data. It's just not as normalized data as 3NF. Here's the great part about this is there's actually 2 additional levels. There's a 4th and a 5th level. Most companies, most people, most data programmers don't go lower than the 3rd, because what happens is, while it makes your database maybe more streamlined, it also makes it much more complicated to use, because data becomes very disjointed, very disconnected, and you're interjoining so many tables to get the data back to a readable state. Most places don't go lower than 3. And then there are plenty of times where 2 makes sense. So for example, the table we were just talking about with the rep number, again, let's just say, for sake's being, that table had 1 billion rows of data. Having to join that onto another table that has, let's say, 1 million rows of table might actually cause your SQL system to hit 90% in core and go away for 5 minutes, and then finally come back with that one record you're looking for. So an example like that, it might be smart for your database to be in that table to be only at 2nd level. You may have duplicate data, but when you're doing your queries go from 5 minutes down to 3 seconds, because it's not having to join tables. The downside of that is now you have data in 2 places, and now you have to be more careful that you don't get data bad in one area, and not, you don't change data in one area and not in the other. So that's why you can try to avoid 2NF if you can, but there's plenty. I can tell you, I know in my organization, we have a couple tables that are in 2NF, because if we put it in 3NF, by the time the data came back, it would just be too long. So we replicate data instead. Oh, sorry, I got sidetracked and was becoming
no problem.
A little bit passionate about that. So let me go pull that.
I mean, I find it all really interesting. I enjoyed the read. I just felt like when I got to the question, I felt like, did I miss something? Because like I didn't want to assume that I'm supposed to deconstruct the table and turn it unnormalized.
Right. See, that's what I mean.
So I was thinking, maybe I missed something. Maybe it's not that simple and obvious. Maybe there's something, so I was like, did it, and then I redid it, and then I'm like, I'm just gonna ask. That's why finally.
No, all I know is I spent 4 to 5 days working on number 1.
Me too.
And I'll be honest, I still don't know if what I got is right.
And then I got to number 2, and I'm like, oh, number 2 is so easy. Yes.
Right. Exactly.
I'm like, all right, I get this. This is easy.
It's like it went from volcano eruption to like playing in the lily field.
And then number 3 looks hard because there's a lot of words there, but it's not really that hard.
Right.
It's not.
Or so you think.
It looks, well, when it came to the diagram, again, because I went through the chapter like 3 times, that doesn't mention attributes in the diagrams at all. It only talks about entity relationships.
So it's not about like the ask, it's just not sure if the wording is off, and then, or if we have all the tools to do what it's asking.
Sure.
Mhm.
So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to share my screen real quick, and I'm showing you the answer to. Let me blow it up actually, so that way I'm showing you the answer to one of the other problems from one of the other databases, but it gives you an idea of what the problem's looking for. So give me 1 second. Let me go find my Zoom here. Over here. All right. So this is what they're talking about when they say diagram. Okay.
Okay.
Don't make it complicated. An ERD typically is much more complicated than this. Normally, you would put the you'd have the table name, plus you'd have all of the column names, which are the you have the entity and the attributes. They're not looking for that. I'm not looking for that. This is much more. What's the relationship? I'm looking more for the relationship. So rep is to orders, as customer is also to orders. Orders is to order line, and then item is to order line. So here, because we have the arrows pointing to order line, both in this direction, we know that this order line is actually a lookup table because the arrows are coming from two different tables into it, right? And this order line is how I resolve the many to many, because now I have a many to one and a one to many this way. If I didn't have this order line, it would be many to many, and you just have a whole lot of trouble. So that's why you're doing the ERD, is just more about the relationship. So I can see these little arrows and see that you understand that, orders is going to have a customer ID number in it, which means that there is a relationship customer to orders.
Right. So then, for example, for A, would I still put like postal code goes to participant, or would like address and city go to postal code? Like, or you know what I mean? Like it throws those things in there.
I'm guessing we don't need the attributes.
Is that what you're saying?
Don't do the attributes. Just the
Oh, okay. Sorry, I
Do
missed
it.
that.
Yep.
I did not do. That is not
Yep.
what I did at
Just
all.
the table names. Yep.
Okay.
Because how the question words it says for each step, make a diagram.
Okay.
Then I was thinking for participant, like it wouldn't be a diagram if it was just a rectangle with participant.
Right.
Like that's how my thinking was.
Right. Well, now let me take a step back though, because there is a place though that what you guys are talking about with the attributes is important, right? So there is I want to say maybe it's a number 3, but one of the questions ask you to not to diagram, but to list it out like this, where you have a table name. And what they want to see here is they want to see that, like in this example, order line has these 2 primary keys. That's why it's underlined.
Yeah.
And what they
I think I got that one good.
Okay. And then what they want you to do is they want you to then show functionally what is dependent on each other, right? So for the good example I can give you is, just like you said, state name is functionally dependent on the state abbreviation. So in that
so
case,
I wrote that out.
That was in number 2.
Yeah,
Okay.
I did people and I wrote that out because it was critical thinking. Is that okay?
yes, that's absolutely okay.
Okay.
And I'll read it through. If I have any questions, I'll obviously shoot a message out. But that's, in that case, we are looking at the attributes, and we're saying these set of attributes relate to this one attribute, and they correlate together, right?
Yeah.
Like me as a person, my first name and last name make me up. So my last name and my first name make me as a person. And so I'm functionally dependent on my first name and last name.
Yeah. I know some of it, I was overthinking because there's like phone number and address. And I'm like, well, they could have more than one phone number. Or they could have 2 addresses.
Yeah.
Then I'm like, nah, don't
overthink it. Yeah.
Don't do it.
Yeah. Now,
Well, in number 3, it doesn't ask for the functioning relation dependent. I mean, only on 2, I thought.
yeah, that's what, and I couldn't remember if it was in 3 or not, but yeah, then it's just in 2. But I wanted to give you, since you were talking about attributes, I wanted to make sure you understood for that particular question, it is about the attributes.
Yes.
So now the good news, like I said, believe it or not, this is from here on out, things become much more simpler and precise. It's very much
Good.
select
That's what I
star,
like.
blah. What I will tell you is from here on out, probably the one thing that I see most often until I have to get feedback on it is do not do manual lookups.
Mhm.
Right.
Manual
So
lookup.
if the question says list out all of the trips that Bill Thomas is the guide for, don't you go to the guide table and use your finger and go down and say Bill. Oh, okay, Bill is he's guide number 216. And so in your query, you actually say where guide number equals 216.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say, well, how did you get that 216? You looked that up on your own and put it in your query. Instead, say where guide name, and you're doing a join. You're joining on that other row, so that way the query first looks that up, grabs back that row, and then links it together. You'll know what I mean when you get there. All of a sudden,
Mhm.
if you physically find yourself having to go to the data and physically look up a piece of information so you can make another query,
Mhm.
then you're going about it wrong. You're doing a manual lookup. Avoid that.
Okay.
It's usually
That's what I thought in chapter 1. As I'm doing it, I was like, this homework's evil, but it's genius. It's like, this is terrible and I hate this. And this is how important it is to, look up actual queries and how to properly do them.
correct.
And not
All I know,
data.
all I know is Sunday at 8:30, I was ready to withdraw from this course.
It was the
Because
worst.
I was
sitting
just
there
totally
cursing
like
your
out in left field.
I got you. Like I said, this is always, and that is a very common feeling for this class. And I've tried, by the way, make this particular module 2 weeks long so we can have more time. And people just go, no, it's just confusing, and I'd rather just suffer 1 week and move on.
It really isn't though. It's just the wording of the book.
It is,
Yeah.
and again, it
That's
goes
really
against,
all it was.
yeah, and again, it goes against your natural thought process.
Yeah.
So
I mean, yeah, finding the dependency and primary keys and all it is confusing and complicated, but it's not that hard.
Yeah.
I've done it before in other classes. This isn't the first class I've done normalizing data, so I had a little
It's just making
familiarity.
sure.
well, now I'm really hurt. I really thought I was, like the first to make you do that. So now,
No, we did like 1 chapter in system analysis, so it was terrible in that class too. So it wasn't that bad. No, it wasn't that bad.
all right. Well, is there any other questions I can help with anyone?
Well,
I'm good.
I just wanted to ask something about the exam.
Sure.
Also,
On
can I send you the homework? Do I still put it in the Dropbox or do I do it via email?
If you're turning it in before tomorrow, put it in the Dropbox and just make a message. Put a message on it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Good night, all.
good night.
I'm taking off.
All right.
Good night, guys.
You said you needed to ask me something?
Yeah, with the exam, I think it was question number 25 that was relative to the pay rate, and then it had commission in there. Well, to me, pay rate and commission are 2 different things. When I talk about a pay rate, I'm talking about an hourly rate. So I can get paid an hourly rate, and then if I sell a lot, I'm going to get a commission. So I kind of toyed with that question back and forth a couple of times, and then I was like, no, to me, it really is 2 different distinct things. And then I just went with what I believe, and I think that's probably why I got 25 wrong. Then there was another one that had the order line question, order underbar line.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and in that one, had I just stayed on the question, I went back to my book and looked at order line, and as my reference information. So when I looked at it, it didn't have a part number in there, and I thought, oh, they're trying to throw me off here with this part number business. And in reality, all I should have done was look at the top because everything was already there. So I don't know. Maybe it's old guy factor. I don't know, but that's the other 3 I got wrong. But I mean, those 2 were the ones that kind of, when afterwards I was done, I was like, I don't know. That's kind of iffy.
Sure. Do me a favor, just shoot me an email about it, so that way I can share it with the the content creator. So that way, at least they're aware that, you know, that there might be a question there, and so they can also reevaluate it and just make sure it feels good for them too.
Yeah, I think in the question with the part number, one that it shows a list just like you have on your screen, right? If it would have said from the information shown above, that would have done it. I wouldn't have to go anywhere else. Then it's a different story. But I actually went back to the book and opened up the page and found the order under bar line and said, oh, that's not here.
I got you. Okay. Well,
And then,
do me a favor, shoot me that message so that way I still want to make sure I share it with the content.
okay, I will.
All right, John, I appreciate
All
it.
right, I'm glad everything's okay. I thought, you know, maybe you had COVID issues or something was going on when you couldn't make it and we didn't hear anything. And I was kind of like, wow, that's not good.
It seemed to scare, I accidentally scared everyone. I actually had the dean and my chair also emailing me like, hey, because I've worked for SPC. I think I'm coming up on 3 years now. And I've never missed a class like that. And so,
are we the only two online here?
Yes.
Okay. When we were on this other channel, like on, I guess, remember you had 2 different sessions.
Yep.
And you could go to session 1 or session 2.
Hold on, let me stop recording.